Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to discuss one of the most explosive and urgent developments in European security and global politics. Poland has just delivered a powerful message aimed directly at Moscow, and the demand is shaking NATO, Europe, and the wider international community. Poland is openly calling for NATO to close the sky on Russia, and this statement has the potential to reshape the ongoing conflict and escalate tensions between Russia and the West. The words chosen by Polish leaders are sharp, symbolic, and full of anger toward Vladimir Putin. What Poland is doing is not just a diplomatic protest, but a loud demand that the alliance take action in a way it has so far avoided. Poland's position is unique in Europe. As a country on NATO's eastern flank, Poland has been one of the strongest supporters of Ukraine since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022. Poland has opened its borders to millions of Ukrainian refugees, sent weapons, trained soldiers, and consistently urged the alliance to do more. For Poland, this war is not just about Ukraine. It is about its own survival and the defense of the whole region against Russian aggression. The Polish government knows that if Ukraine falls, Poland could be next in line. That fear and strategic calculation are what fuels Warsaw's uncompromising tone. When Polish officials talk about closing the sky, they are pointing to the devastating missile and drone strikes that Russia launches almost daily against Ukrainian cities. These attacks target energy infrastructure, civilian neighborhoods, and essential services. For Ukraine, the sky has been the most dangerous space, where Russian superiority in long-range missiles and air power gives them the ability to strike deep behind the front line. Poland is essentially arguing that NATO cannot allow Russia to terrorize civilians from the air without a strong response. Closing the sky would mean imposing a no-fly zone or some form of aerial defense shield that NATO would enforce, denying Russia the ability to operate freely in Ukrainian or possibly even Russian airspace. This is not the first time such an idea has been raised. In the early weeks of the war, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky pleaded with NATO to establish a no-fly zone. At that time, the United States and its allies refused, fearing that such a step would lead to direct war with Russia. Enforcing a no-fly zone requires shooting down enemy aircraft and striking missile launchers. That would have meant NATO pilots fighting Russian pilots, a scenario that could have triggered World War III. However, 2 years later, Poland seems to believe that the situation has changed. The brutality of Russian attacks, the determination of Ukraine to resist, and the constant danger to NATO's own territory from stray missiles and drones are all fueling Warsaw's call for action. Poland's demand is also meant as a slap at Putin himself. By using such strong language, Poland is telling Russia that its threats no longer scare them. Polish leaders see Moscow as weakened by the war, stretched militarily, and facing economic strain under sanctions. At the same time, Poland sees an opportunity for NATO to prove that it is not afraid to confront Russian aggression. For Warsaw, standing firm now is the only way to prevent larger disasters later. They argue that weakness or hesitation will only embolden Putin to go further. But how realistic is this demand? That is where the debate inside NATO becomes very complicated. The United States, Germany, France, and other allies understand Poland's concerns, but are still cautious about any move that could directly involve NATO forces in combat with Russia. Most Western governments prefer to support Ukraine with weapons, training, intelligence, and funding rather than direct military intervention. Yet Poland's voice carries weight, and its security concerns cannot be ignored. As a frontline state, Poland is constantly exposed to Russian hybrid operations, cyber attacks, and military threats from the Kaliningrad enclave. That proximity gives Warsaw a credibility that others further west do not share. Another factor shaping Poland's demand is the recent incidents of Russian missiles crossing into NATO territory. There have been cases where fragments of Russian or Ukrainian air defense missiles landed in Polish fields, killing or injuring civilians. Each of these moments sparks fear that a miscalculation could drag NATO into the war, whether it wants to or not. By calling for NATO to close the sky, Poland is essentially trying to move from reacting to accidents toward proactive defense. They want NATO to take charge of the skies so that such incidents are prevented rather than investigated after the damage is done. Closing the sky could take different forms. It might mean deploying advanced NATO air defense systems along the border, capable of shooting down missiles before they cross into NATO or Ukrainian airspace. It could mean placing NATO aircraft on constant patrol to intercept threats. Or it could involve more ambitious steps, such as establishing safe corridors where humanitarian aid flows without the fear of Russian bombardment. Each of these ideas carries its own risks, but they all reflect Poland's determination to turn words into action. The tone of Polish leaders is also important. They are not just politely suggesting this measure, they are demanding it with urgency. This reflects deep frustration that despite years of calls for stronger measures, the war still rages with immense destruction. Polish politicians argue that the time for half measures is over. In their view, NATO must finally match its rhetoric about defending freedom with real action in the air. They believe that anything less would betray Ukraine and leave Europe permanently unsafe. For Vladimir Putin, Poland's message is an open challenge. He thrives on dividing NATO, hoping that disagreements among allies will weaken their unity. But Poland's sharp words could also strengthen NATO solidarity. The alliance is built on collective defense, and when one member feels threatened, the whole group is expected to respond. Poland is using that principle to its maximum, pushing allies to recognize that the fight in Ukraine is inseparable from their own security. Of course, this escalation also carries risks. If NATO were to close the sky and directly engage Russian forces, the Kremlin could retaliate in unpredictable ways. Moscow might target NATO infrastructure, escalate cyber warfare, or even consider nuclear threats. This is why the debate is so difficult. Western leaders must weigh the risk of escalation against the risk of inaction. If Russia continues to bomb Ukraine freely, the humanitarian toll and destabilization could also spiral out of control. Poland is forcing NATO to confront this dilemma head-on. From a strategic point of view, Poland's stance also reflects its rising power within Europe. Over the past decade, Poland has become one of the strongest military forces on the continent. It has invested heavily in defense, purchasing American tanks, fighter jets, and missile systems. Warsaw now sees itself not only as a protector of its own borders, but as a leader in regional security. By demanding NATO close the sky, Poland is showing that it is not afraid to lead, even if others hesitate. The reaction from other NATO members will be crucial in the coming days and weeks. Some may support Poland's demand in principle, but call for caution in practice. Others may outright reject the idea, warning of escalation. Still, the fact that Poland is making this demand so openly ensures that the debate will not go away. It forces NATO to address questions it has long tried to avoid. How far is the alliance willing to go to defend Ukraine? Where is the line between support and direct involvement? And how much risk is it ready to take to stop Putin? For the Ukrainian people, Poland's words are a sign of hope. They show that one of their closest neighbors understands their suffering and is willing to take bold steps. For Ukrainians under constant bombardment, the idea of NATO closing the sky represents a dream of safety. It is a reminder that they are not forgotten, that their struggle is seen, and that their allies may one day do more than just send weapons. At the same time, the demand puts pressure on Washington and Brussels. The United States, as NATO's leading power, cannot ignore Warsaw's call. European leaders, facing pressure from their own publics to end the war, must now address whether closing the sky is realistic or reckless. The conversation will shape future policy, and Poland has ensured that it will not be an easy one. In the end, the demand that NATO close the sky on Russia is about more than just air defense. It is about defining the future of Europe's security order. It is about deciding whether Russia will be allowed to terrorize its neighbors with impunity, or whether the West will finally say enough. Poland's bold words strike at the heart of this debate. Whether NATO acts or not, the message has already sent shockwaves through Moscow, Kiev, and every capital in Europe. As events continue to unfold, one thing is clear. Poland has chosen to take a stand that many others fear to make. Its leaders believe that history will judge whether NATO had the courage to stop aggression when it could, or whether hesitation allowed it to grow into an even bigger disaster. The sky over Ukraine has become the front line of freedom, and Poland is demanding that NATO not just watch, but act. And so, the story continues. With every missile Russia fires, with every city Ukraine struggles to rebuild, the pressure on NATO grows. Poland has spoken loudly, slapping Putin with words that carry the weight of history. The coming months will reveal whether those words turn into action, or whether they remain a warning unheeded.